Hello friends, welcome to Islington Listens, wisdom from a community of faith that doesn't think the same, vote the same, or love the same, but we are trying our best to follow in the way of Jesus with compassion and hope. So we're singing that, I was picturing, have you ever watched an eagle soar? Or an eagle take flight? There's not a lot of anxious, quick flapping, is there, when you're an eagle? There's an invitation to soaring and trusting the wind. So I invite you just to deepen in to being held, to not flapping, to being here in this moment where we begin Lent together with the story of Jesus' ministry, with a story that's being read and preached all around the world, because after Jesus has this powerful experience of being claimed and known publicly as beloved by God in his baptism, the next thing that happens is that the Spirit sends him out into the wilderness, where he meets the tempter. And in the meeting of the tempter, we are reminded that the people of God, long before that moment, had the words of the psalmist, the words prayed and experienced, knowing that God meets them. So you may be starting Lent feeling beloved. You may be starting feeling lost or tempted or afraid or in the wilderness, needing assurance. You may be beginning Lent with the words of the psalm calling you to hope. Remember, after this time in the wilderness, Jesus rises and leaves and becomes the one that we know in a new way, who did such amazing things and said such wonderful things that people just had to follow him. They were drawn to him. They were interested in knowing about him. They would ask him questions. And one day, a person asked him what the most important thing in life was. And he said, "You already know." "That is true," the one asking said. "I do. It is to love God and to love people just like they are your neighbors." The person paused a while in thought and then asked another question. "But who is my neighbor?" And then Jesus responds with this parable. There was once someone who went from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and as he went along the way, he was attacked by robbers. They hurt him, they took everything he had, and they left him by the side of the road, half dead. There was also a great priest coming from the temple who went along that road from Jerusalem down to Jericho. And as he went on his way, he came to the place where the traveler was, who had been hurt, who had everything taken from him, who was left by the side of the road half dead. And when the priest came to him, the priest went to the other side and went along the road another way. There was also someone who worked at the temple who went from Jerusalem to Jericho regularly. He was one of the people who helped the priests. He took care of the temple and he helped with the music, and he was called a Levite. And when the Levite came to the place where the traveler was, who had been hurt, who had everything taken from him, and who had been left by the side of the road half dead, the Levite went to the other side and went on their way. And there was also a person on the road who did not live in Jerusalem. They were visiting from a country called Samaria, and the people in Samaria did not like the people of Jerusalem. And the people in Jerusalem did not like the people of Samaria. And when the stranger came to where the traveler was, who had been hurt, who had everything taken from him, and had been left on the side of the road half dead, the stranger went to him. The stranger put medicine on the places where the person was hurt. He gave them his coat to put on. He put them on his donkey, and he took them to a place to spend the night. He offered shelter and care for his body and left coins to pay for everything else in between. This may be the most famous parable Jesus told. The story resonates across religion and belief. We know it as the Good Samaritan. Its title has become a synonym for everything we are called to do, to embody how we love others. And we have all encountered this story. We've heard, we've seen, or been ourselves part of the story. The traveler, the one who brought harm, the priest, the passerby, the one left on the side of the road who had everything taken from them and was half dead, the Samaritan. This story points us to the universal spiritual journey of unlearning fear and leaning into love. Just want you to hear those phrases for a minute. They could be a breath prayer for you for the next 40 days. May I unlearn fear. May I lean into love. Seems simple, doesn't it? I've heard this sermon before. You can make your grocery list and tune out because you know the answer to the question. It is wildly hard to be a good Samaritan. We might not want to admit it. It can be very tempting. It's much easier to walk past the one left on the side of the road, and there may be many legitimate reasons why. Distraction, snobbery, too much to lose, overwhelm, fear. Remember, fear is foundational to this story. Jesus intentionally depicts the encounter between the helper and the hurt to be between a Samaritan and a Jewish person. They weren't friends. They never ate together. They didn't talk to one another. They were not neighbors. They weren't even strangers. They were enemies. Hate and fear were the cultural and religious border between these two groups. And yet one act, one choice, to be brave enough to cross it into the unknown, into the wilderness, one caring act, love over fear. Author Marianne Williamson wrote, "Love is what we were born with, but fear is what we learned here." The spiritual journey is the unlearning of fear and prejudice and the acceptance of love back into our hearts. Love is the essential reality. Love, the source of life. Love, what we name God. Love that unifies us across border. And also, the source is not separated from the purpose of why we were here. Love, our purpose on earth. To be consciously aware of it. To experience love in ourselves and in others becomes the meaning of our lives. Meaning does not lie in things. Meaning lies in us. And that's why we need the season of Lent, because it's so easy to forget that. It's a 40-day time of intentional reflection and ritual and fasting, and it connects us to the meaning of life, that God's love is the essential reality, and it's our reason for being here. It is a time when we practice seeing the world as it really is, fragile and unfinished and held together by grace. And this Lent, well, it has an urgency about it, doesn't it? The call to be a good Samaritan, to love with radical compassion, is growing ever more pressing each day, each decision in our world. I want to tell you, I wasn't with you last week because on Saturday night, I was the date of a military chaplain to the garrison ball, where the military leaders, the lieutenant governor was there, the mayor was there, the commander-in-chief of the army addressed the room of 1,000, of 500 people serving their family members and also retired and veterans. There was an awareness for me in that time when the commander-in-chief of the army began his speech saying, every year someone gets up and talks about the work that we do and describes the times as unprecedented. He mentioned the ending of world conflicts in World War I and II. He mentioned 9/11 and the response, military response across the world. And then he said, but now is unprecedented times. Now is an awareness, as he was speaking, about the words that come to us in story of enemy and neighbor, of ally, of things we take for granted, of the place of fear, of the awareness of when we're called to be brave, and what it means to serve, and also what it means to look away. I brought the Good Samaritan into that time where most people were just so grateful to be reminded that they were cared for and fed and thanked in a time of complicated service and politics. So I stand here aware of the speeches we've been hearing about these unprecedented times. I think of how many times Lent has rolled over us. How we have set an intention or made a plan for Easter and hoped Lent would just kind of roll by because we couldn't wait for chocolate bunnies and spring and the sap to run and be boiled into sweet maple syrup. This Lent is different because communally our hearts are attuned to lament and suffering in a different way. It truly seems to carry a new level of weight. We are aware of the borders, of tariffs, of rights being stripped away, of people being left to die in ditches from hate-fueled power hoarding. It is harder this Lent to keep walking by. And we all have this opportunity, this gift, this ritual, this practice to stop, to notice, to discern, to love, to wonder where and how we will stand by the vulnerable, to when and how we'll be invited to walk across and be a bridge, or to speak no loudly against hate and prejudice. We have the opportunity to set out significant rituals in these 40 days that intentionally spread more love for those who have been beaten up by the world right now. But I invite you to just look around and notice for a moment. Notice who's beside you. I didn't make you talk to each other this morning. I didn't ask a question. Literally every single person in this room has had an experience lately of feeling beaten up or broken down or burdened. It's not just you. So can you just notice? I literally mean turn and look and notice someone that's look them, yeah, you don't need to talk to them. Don't need to fix it. It's just oh wait, it's not only me who might be feeling this way. The traveler in the story, the Samaritan in the story, the ones walking by, they're all here. In fact, we're all of them at the same time. And the danger is that we don't notice. The danger is that we think it's just us feeling this way. The danger is that we miss the story that's bigger, the story of love that will carry us. Our Lenten theme is the container for how we'll love each other this Lent. It's called Table Talk and Everything in Between, because we know that living into polarities will no longer serve us. God is calling us to be within the messy, complex middle that includes birth and life and death, that includes our enemies and our strangers and neighbors, that includes all of our fears and all of our hopes. We have embraced the practice of hospitality, I would say, for generations in this place. And for the fall and the experience through Christmas and being together at soup lunch in the season of Epiphany, we have experienced a welcome that has been wide. But we each have had a boundary around our experience of hospitality. The things we're not willing to talk about are the things that feel more complicated. The things that might divide us rather than if we stay talking about the weather and the parking. We are invited this season to listen to each other, to spend some time together, to look beyond false binaries and easy answers, to be more curious about what matters to people and what people love than how they voted or what they're most complaining about. We are invited to imagine where God might be meeting us beyond the categories we create. This Lent, we're trusting that God shows up in shades of gray, rainbow hues, and everywhere in between. We will also come to this communion table each week during Lent to be nourished and cared for in worship, in healing prayer, in time of hospitality. Being at table together will strengthen us in hope. So just in case you think I'm metaphorically saying we're only coming to this table metaphorically, no. Physically, for every week of Lent, we will be coming to this table to experience communion. And so you may need to just give yourself a little bit of time, because the more people are here, service will take a little bit longer to feed everyone. But the act of weekly remembering will sustain us, will invite us into conversations that matter. Thanks be to God for that invitation to show up again and again with love. The way Christ showed up again and again for all the complex and small and big and in between good Samaritan moments of our lives. Thanks be to God for a love that is always there. May it be so. Amen. Thanks for listening, friends. For other ways to connect, go to islingtonunited.org. May God's wisdom and love keep finding you.